Early in the morning, on the back mountain of the profound sword sect, Xuan Yi's white robe fluttered in the wind as he stood on top of the mountain. His long black hair fluttered in the wind as he gazed at the mountain in front of him. Covered in mist, the landscape was like a magical land. White cranes hovered over his head, and the chirping of flying insects could be heard. Everything was covered in a white mist. It's been 3 years. It's been 3 years since I was reborn in the land of Tianxuan. It's time for the profound sword sect to start the sword worship meeting again. Xuan Yi lifted his head to look at the sky and remembered the time he first entered the land of Tianxuan. He migrated from the earth and came to the Xiangsha world, where demonic beasts raged. There were a huge number of sects, and all races mixed together. It was a Xiangsha world called the land of Tianxuan. It was a world where cultivators sought immortality, hot and liberated. They walked on lotuses and waves to purify their mortal bones and develop their holy souls. There were cultivators who traveled through the sky with long swords. There were huge demonic beasts that were as high as a mountain and could wipe out an entire city in the blink of an eye. There were also countless powerful sects guarding the habitat of the human race. Countless geniuses have sought immortality in this world. Powerful owners guarded and protected this land. The Xuan Yi Profound Sword Sect was one of the top 100 sects in the southern domain of Tianxuan land. It was also known as the Slaughter Sect. The Abyssal Sword Sect controlled almost 1,000 cities in the southern realm. The total population was over 10 billion people. Out of those 10 billion people, they were all fighting to join the Profound Sword Sect. Every time there was news that the sect was recruiting disciples, it caused a huge stir. There were even some important figures in the cities who were willing to offer untold treasures just to get a seat in the sect. In this chaotic world, everyone yearned to join a powerful sect and find a way to become stronger. They longed to go the way of immortality. Joining the Deep Sword Sect was undoubtedly the best option, because the sect had a 1,000-year history and a powerful past. The Sword Worship Assembly was held every 3 years to select outstanding students for special training, and he, Xuan Yi, 3 years ago, when he first migrated, he was still an apprentice servant of the Profound Sword Sect. He was only a 6th-level disciple of the Qi Condensation Realm. In the land of Tianxuan, the Qi Condensation Realm was the lowest level of cultivation, having barely set foot on the path of immortal cultivation. Above him was the Foundation Creation Sphere. Only those who set foot in this realm could be considered true immortal cultivators. After the Foundation Realm, there was the Golden Core Realm, the Divine Power Realm, the Law Enforcement Realm, and the Sect Master Realm. Even higher were the levels of the Great Masters. They were as rare as phoenix feathers or killing horns. Originally, Xuan Yi, who was in the 6th level of the Qi Condensation Realm, was basically cannon fodder in the last Profound Sword Sect worship meeting. However, he later transmigrated and awakened the system. As a transmigrator, Xuan Yi awakened a system called Becoming Stronger after accepting disciples. From the very beginning, he received the power of the 1st level in the law enforcement sphere. In the shock, the entire Profound Sword Sect. Did the servant apprentice really have the power of the law enforcement realm? The sect master immediately appointed Xuan Yi as an elder. Since then, the legend of Xuan Yi had spread throughout the Profound Sword Sect. He was the #1 genius in the sect. What was even more exciting was that Xuan Yi, who was less than 20 years old, became the youngest law enforcement elder in the history of the sect. One should know that usually the elders of the sect, even those with outstanding talent, did not break into the law enforcement realm until they were over 60. 3 years passed, and Xuan Yi fully understood the functions of the system. Basically, it was divided into 2 parts. First, as he recruited disciples, his strength increased. The more talented the students were, the more power he received. Second, by completing the mission given by the system, he could obtain natural treasures, immortality cultivation methods, elixirs, and miracle cures. Back then, when he moved here, he demonstrated the cultivation power that the system bestowed upon him at the last Sword Worship Assembly. Over the past 3 years, he has taken on 2 apprentices of decent ability and completed several missions. Accordingly, his strength increased. Xuanyi calmed his mind, and a virtual interface appeared in his mind. Owner, Xuanyi's sphere, the second level of the law enforcement sphere capabilities, not stable, change with the number of students' personality, law enforcement elder of the profound sword sect disciple, Lin Yingsu, realm. Level 8 of the foundation making realm, ability. 68, Lin Hu, realm, level 7 of the Qi condensation realm, ability. 17, items, 1000-year ice armor, 7-star sword. Side mission, a student reaching the golden core realm. Mission reward, star gathering technique. Primary mission, 3 students reach at least foundation level. Mission reward, cultivation level upgraded to law enforcement level 5. The mission rewards in the mission panel were very generous. The star gathering technique was a divine power technique created by a super genius in the divine power realm. It had a total of 10 levels. Having mastered it, it was possible to pluck the stars with one hand. It was said that the super master who created the star gathering technique once fought several demon beast kings and killed them all. At the moment, the star gathering technique occupied the 19th position on Tianzhuan's Earth Divine Power list. The cultivators coveted any divine power or technique from the divine power list. Many cultivators were willing to fight to the death to gain divine power. After teaching a disciple the golden core realm, I will obtain the divine power star selection technique. It looks like I will have to work harder. He glanced at Lin Yingsu in the attribute panel. She was the first student he took on, and her abilities were quite good. If no one had taught her, she could also have advanced into the golden core realm through cultivation, but at a slower pace. But now Xuanyi was rewarded. Would he sit back and do nothing? Just when Xuanyi decided to put all his cultivation resources into this disciple, a woman ran up to him. She breathed heavily and said, "Master, the sword worship meeting is about to begin. Do you want to go and take a look?" Xuanyi turned his head and saw that it was his disciple, Lin Yingsu. Right now, her gaze was evasive and her cheeks were flushed. She did not dare to look at Xuanyi. Her master's strength was so great that she did not dare to meet his gaze. "I understood you. I will be there right now," Xuanyi quietly replied. Today was the profound sword sect worship assembly. The sect invited all the important figures from the top 100 sects in the southern domain to come and watch. The so-called sword worship assembly was, on the one hand, meant to demonstrate the strength of the profound sword sect in order to better lure outstanding disciples into the sect. On the other hand, it was a method of selecting outstanding disciples within the sect and allowing the elders of law enforcement to advise those disciples. For these students, it was a huge event. Every time the competition was held, it was attended by basically all the internal and external disciples of the sect. In addition to the chance to get the advice of the elders, there was also the chance to win the favor of the elders and become their personal disciples. One had to know that the lowest level that the elders in the sect possessed was the law enforcement realm, and that was the realm of law enforcement for those who cultivate the sword. In the cultivation world, everyone knew that among cultivators with the same level of cultivation power, sword cultivators' attacking techniques were unmatched. If they could become personal disciples of the sect elders, they would reach much higher levels in the future. After all, who didn't want to ride a sword and fly around the world? Thus, each sword worship gathering attracted many disciples, especially those of the outer sect, as it was the only chance to change their fate. They hoped that the elders would take a liking to them and change their lives. Of course, in most cases, the elders chose disciples from the inner sect, but even so, for the disciples of the outer sect, even if there was only a small chance, it was enough to make these people extremely excited. And at that moment, all the disciples of the outer sect were anxiously waiting for the sword worship meeting. However, a quarrel came from around the corner. "Hey, you trash, what are you looking at?" shouted a rough man with a long face. Judging by the yellow burlap they were wearing, it was clear that they were disciples of the outer sect. "Isn't that Ma Liang? Why is he always bullying this girl?" asked an outer sect disciple. "Do not you know? This girl's name is Bai Weiwei. She comes from the Bai clan of Young Moon City, which is under the control of the profound sword sect. So what? Have you forgotten where Ma Liang is from? She comes from the Bai clan of Young Moon City, which is under the control of the profound sword sect. So what? Have you forgotten where Ma Liang is from? Sect Earthstone, the Earth Rock sect, and the Bai clan are two of the three main powers in New Moon City. These two forces are enemies. It would be a miracle if these two people could get along. People began to whisper. Many of them looked like they were enjoying the show. However, their words did not cause the slightest ripple in Bai Weiwei's eyes. Meanwhile, her friends began to worry. Weiwei, let's go, okay? If we can't afford to offend him, we can leave, the chubby girl said as she grabbed her arm. Bai Weiwei stroked the little girl's hand and smiled at her. She smiled reassuringly at the latter, but a shadow of worry flickered in her eyes. She was a genius. When she entered the profound sword sect 5 years ago, she was already at the 9th level of the Qi condensation realm. Although she was still half a step away from the foundation creation realm, she was already an inner sect disciple. However, 3 years ago, Elder Ma appeared to the sect out of nowhere and entrusted her with a mission. He promised to give her the foundation creation pill after the mission was over, allowing her to break into the foundation creation realm. After the mission was over, Elder Ma did give her a pill, but it wasn't a real foundation pill. She understood this because since Bai Weiwei had taken the pill, her cultivation progress had stopped and her level had begun to drop. This made her extremely uneasy, but since there was no evidence that it was Elder Ma's handiwork, she could only swallow the bitter fruit. Thus, right now, her cultivation power was only at the 5th level of the Qi condensation realm. Due to the decline of her power, she had changed from an inner sect disciple to an outer sect disciple. She understood that if her cultivation problem was not solved, she would not be able to cultivate. Bai Weiwei glanced at Ma Liang, who had joined the sect at the same time as her, and a sense of powerlessness rose in her heart because she could no longer determine Ma Liang's level of cultivation. She also recently received a letter from her family. The Earthstone sect and the Whitebone sect joined forces to suppress the Bai clan. Now the pressure on her family was enormous. She hoped that she could find a strong patron for her family in the profound sword sect. Thinking about this, Bai Weiwei felt extremely upset. This was because even if she could cultivate, she would still be ridiculed and suppressed by Ma Liang in the outer sect. How could she find an elder to be her teacher? She was not as calm as she seemed. However, Bai Weiwei's eyes lit up as she saw 4 big words in front of her: Sword Worship Gathering. It is true that this meeting was a saving straw for her. As long as she can get the elder's approval, all her problems will be solved. So she just said, "Get out." Ma Liang was stunned by disbelief. Then the expression in his eyes turned into a mocking one. Ever since his cultivation power reached the 9th level of the Qi condensation realm, no disciple of the outer sect had ever dared to speak to him like that. But now Bai Weiwei really dared to contradict him. Ma Liang unrestrainedly released his 9th level Qi condensation realm aura. An invisible aura suppressed Bai Weiwei until she stopped breathing. "Ha, you piece of shit. Even the weakest sect elder would not grace you with the glance. You even, damn it, dare to put on airs in front of me. Do you still consider yourself a genius?" The disciples of the outer sect felt Ma Liang's aura and were shocked. "Oh my god, this is the 9th level peak aura of the Qi condensation realm. Could it be that all the rumors about Big Brother Ma are true?" "What are the rumors?" "It says here that Ma Liang has made half a step in the foundation creation realm, and he is now studying with Elder Ma. The elder had just appointed him as his personal disciple. I really envy that he can learn from an elder. I would be happy if I could be an elder's apprentice servant." Bai Weiwei felt suffocated, but she had a strong will and didn't want to show it. Her gaze was hard as she gritted her teeth and moved forward. When Ma Liang saw this, he realized that she was a stubborn woman. No matter how he suppressed her, she just wouldn't give up. He removed his aura and said indifferently, "Forget it. After I become an elder's disciple, the status of the Earth Rock sect in New Moon City will rise. Your Bai clan will submit to us. When that time comes, let's see how arrogant you are." Bai Weiwei was upset. She has been coming here to study for years, but her strength has waned instead of growing. She let her family down. Instead of accompanying her parents like an exemplary daughter, she brought enemies into her family. Her eyes were red and her body was trembling. However, she pulled herself together and held back her tears. At that moment, several white-robed elders arrived after the sect master. The sword worship meeting has officially begun. The martial arts practice field of the profound sword sect. As the top ranks of the sect arrived one by one, each elder caused quite a stir among the disciples, and the last figure that floated down attracted the attention of the students. Look, who is this? The disciple pointed to the white-clad Xuanyi and shouted, "Oh my God, he's so handsome." His chiseled handsome face almost blinded my eyes. Yes, I dare not look at him. Wow, he's really handsome. I want to have from children. The student was crazy and her eyes were full of stars. As they exclaimed, many young girls looked at Xuanyi with infatuation in their eyes. Seeing that Xuanyi was in the spotlight, some of the students were unhappy and thought that he was just a student who had nothing but good looks to recommend him. However, when they saw the small golden sword badge on Xuanyi's chest, they swallowed their words because this badge showed that its owner was a law enforcement elder. You're new here, so you don't know Elder Xuanyi. After all, Elder Xuanyi usually stays on the far mountain and doesn't interfere in the affairs of the sect. He only appears on important occasions. The senior disciple spoke of Xuanyi with respect and admiration on his face. He explained, "He is the youngest elder in the history of our sect. At the last sword worship meeting, he was still an outer sect disciple, but he had shown the strength of the law enforcement realm. He was directly promoted by the sect master to the position of elder. From an outer sect disciple to a law enforcement elder, he's so amazing. You don't even know Elder Xuanyi is an influential figure in our sect, a genius who broke into the law enforcement realm at the age of 20. Oh my God, this elder is younger than me, but he joined the law enforcement realm." Elder Xuan is also very generous to his students. Moreover, he doesn't care if you are an external or internal sect disciple when he selects his disciples. How did you know that? You are not Elder Xuan's disciple. Although I am not his disciple, during the last sword worship gathering, Elder Xuan accepted 2 outer sect disciples in a row. Moreover, he even gave one of the students a bottle of foundation pills. The student said enviously, "I'm not talking nonsense. I heard this from his disciple, Ling Yingsu, when she broke through to the founding establishment realm." People gasped. Foundation pills. While the others were scrambling for resources, Xuanyi actually gave such a precious item to his disciple, and it was a full bottle. You need to know that the foundation pills weren't regular pills. This kind of pill would increase the likelihood that the cultivator would break through from the chi condensation realm to the foundation creation realm. While the other elders treated the pills as treasure, Elder Xuan gave his disciple a bottle of them as if he were handing out snacks. Really? It's incredible. Many students looked at Xuanyi with admiration. After all, in the cultivation world, good resources would speed up cultivation speed. Who wouldn't want to learn from a generous master? However, there were students who had doubts. So generous? Could Elder Xuan be the son of the sect master? The student asked suspiciously. Impossible. Elder Xuan is a legend of our outer sect. You must not spread lies. The student's eyes were full of madness. She clenched her fists and looked like she was about to start a fight. Yes, it's absolutely impossible. The master of our sect has been living for hundreds of years. How could he have such a young and strong son? Even a genetic mutation cannot explain this, the student said softly. I would have died to be able to learn from Elder Xuan. Elder Xuan is mine. Do not quarrel with me if our friendship is dear to you. Ah, Elder Xuan just looked at me. I can't take it anymore. I think I'm falling in love. Xuanyi sat quietly in his chair. What he didn't know was that his casual glance had just sparked an insane argument among a group of female students. Of course, his casual glance allowed him to spot a good student. Hey, not bad. She really has a superb yin-yang physique. In all of the southern dominions, this is extremely rare, but a physique for cultivation. However, she is injured and therefore unable to manifest the strength of her superior physique. I can think of a way to solve this. However, let's wait and see. Xuan Yi did not immediately accept the student. After all, he must figure out the character of the student before accepting her. If the student's temper was bad and she did something that hurt people, Xuan Yi would have killed her without hesitation. And at this moment, the sword worship meeting was about to begin. Next to Xuan Yi was the deep sword sect master Qing Zuzi. Dressed in a silver-white long robe, Qing Zuzi stared into the void nearby with a smile. After a while, he stood up and said into the void, "Since my old friend from the Heavenly Array sect is here, let's chat." Ha ha ha, you really are the consummate master of the sword cultivator sect. My little void teleportation technique cannot escape your eyes. The voice came from the void. Everyone was shocked as the void was gradually torn apart. A middle-aged man in a black robe stepped out. He stood in the sky above the martial arts field, and the patterns of the array under his feet continuously thickened. That person was the Heavenly Array sect master Li Changqing. Behind him stood a young girl. The young girl's eyes were cold with arrogance. After all, being the personal disciple of the Heavenly Array sect master was her greatest pride. Sect Master Li, you are too modest. Who doesn't know that your array building methods are second to none? Back then, when you were still in the foundation creation realm, you could already be hiding among the masters of the Golden Core realm. After so many years, I fear that your strength has become even more powerful. Qing Zuzi flattered Li Changqing. Ha 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 ha. Hearing the flattery, Li Changqing was very pleased. Although his cultivation level was at the peak of the 9th level of the law enforcement realm, which was slightly lower than that of sect leader Qing Zuzi, he could make up the difference with his array skills. Thus, they were both almost equal in strength. Xuan Yi did not pay much attention to the flattery between the two of them. Just as Xuan Yi closed his eyes to check if there were any other disciples with good abilities, a clear voice came from the ground. "HM, old ghost Li, if I hadn't seen an interesting demonic beast and fought it for a moment, I would have arrived before you." Then there was an explosion.
You have reached your free reading limit.
A hole 5 meters wide appeared in the ground. The dark-faced man sat on a green python that was tens of meters long. He had an orange-yellow demonic core in his hand. What was shocking was that this person named Wang Yi was half a step closer to the sect master realm. The spirit python beneath him even possessed the power of the first level of the law enforcement realm. Landing on the ground, the dark-faced man silently handed over the demonic core to the young man behind him. Although the young man smiled as he looked around, he did not hide his arrogance. After all, he was a personal disciple of the Myriad Beast sect master and could temporarily communicate with the spirit of the python under his feet with a secret technique and a high-class demonic core. When Li Changqing heard the man's words, not only did he not get angry, he even laughed and said, "Taoist brother, has your strength improved again? That demonic core came from a great demon from the 5th level of the law enforcement realm, right?" Ha ha ha. Wang Yi laughed heartily. Although he did not answer, his hearty laughter gave an affirmative answer. "Qing Zuzi, I'm not late, right?" Outside the martial arts field, the master of the pill sect flew in the form of a streak of light. Before Qing Zuzi could answer, several more streaks of light flew across the sky from afar. They were all powerful forces from the top 100 sects in the southern domain. When Qing Zuzi saw that all the people who had come were sect masters and their disciples were next to them, he frowned slightly. Like the profound sword sect, these great sects were in the top 100 great sects of the southern domain. Why do they come to my sword worship meeting with their best students? Do they really think that my sect cannot train disciples and come to poach disciples from my profound sword sect? If so, it will reflect badly on the sect. However, if they think so poorly of my profound sword sect, they will be in for a big surprise. Qing Zuzi glanced at Xuan Yi, who was slowly looking around while sitting in a chair. Xuan Yi was in his early 20s, but he had the power of a law enforcement realm. Such a genius was very rare in the entire Tianxuan country. Qing Ziuzi slowly approached Xuanyi. He said, Elder Xuanyi, I have to disturb you and ask you to be the representative at the sword worship meeting. No, this is too big a problem for me, Xuanyi bluntly refused. The other sect masters were surprised when they saw that Xuanyi, a simple elder, was so rude to his sect master in front of so many people. This guy was only an elder, but he dared to be so rude to his sect master. Maybe he had some kind of influential past? What surprised Wang Yi the most was that Qing Zuzi's expression didn't change at all. If it was in the Myriad Beast sect, the elder would not even dare to breathe heavily while facing his sect master. Li Changqing was also surprised. He didn't think his old friend had a good temper. You should have known that Qing Shuji was an extremely brave guy in his youth. Any young man who dared to act so arrogantly in the presence of Qing Ziuzi would be severely reprimanded. But what happened after that shocked them. Instead of reprimanding the young man, Qing Ziuzi folded his palms like a mouthpiece and bowed respectfully to Xuanyi. Qing Shuji quickly explained to the sect masters present. Ahem, sect masters, this is the most powerful elder of the profound sword sect, Xuanyi. Elder Xuan is also present at the sword worship assembly. He then sent a voice message to Xuanyi. Elder Xuan, this meeting is about the reputation of our sect. This time even the old people who had not been out for years came, and they even brought their best students. Our sect can only rely on you to resolve the crisis. As the strictest sect master of the southern domain, Qing Ziuzi was actually rejected by one of his elders on such an important occasion. He couldn't help laughing bitterly in his heart. However, with Xuanyi's incomparable talent at his age, his future prospects would definitely far surpass all the people in his sect and even in the entire southern domain. Therefore, even though Xuanyi was rude to him, Qing Shuji did not dare to say anything. Elder Xuan? Wang Yi lost his patience. Genius elder? He was only a junior at the second level of law enforcement. His myriad beast sect could summon beast spirits to fight alongside them. He was confident that he would be able to kill enemies with a higher power level than his. Countless geniuses were killed by the green python at his feet. Genius? It was just food for his spirit beast. On one side, Li Changqing's eyes flickered, and ripple circles appeared in his eyes. It was the Sky Ray sect's technique, Void Eye. Kostaya's age was no more than 20 years old, but his strength was at the second level in the realm of law enforcement. The boy's strength was unexpectedly high. He was a genius that was hard to find in 100 years and broke into the law enforcement realm before the age of 20. On the contrary, his beloved disciple standing behind him, with the help of the gathering array, only recently reached the 9th level of the Golden Core realm. It would be quite difficult for a student to break into the realm of law enforcement at the age of 20. With that thought in his mind, he looked at Xuanyi with some appreciation. However, if Li Changqing knew that Xuanyi had broken through from scratch. With that thought in his mind, he looked at Xuanyi with some appreciation. However, if Li Changqing knew that Xuanyi had broken through from scratch into the law enforcement realm in 1 year, he would have been shocked. Most importantly, Xuanyi's breakthrough was not based on array methods. The spiritual energy obtained through the array techniques was of the most ordinary kind. Instead, Xuanyi received incomparably pure spiritual energy from the system. These two energies were completely different categories. At that moment, Xuanyi saw that people were looking at them with either surprise or contempt. Although he was not a person who liked to show off, he did not like being considered a laughing stock. Moreover, the head of the sect asked him for help. So he stood up and said softly, "Fine. Since the sect master requested, I will hold a sword worship meeting. I now announce the official start. Next, I will tell you guys about the criteria for recruiting students during this meeting. There are 3 ratings. First, check out the talent. Second, check the purity of spiritual energy. Third, test your combat abilities. Do you see the black stone tablet in the center of the training field? This is a 7-color deep jade tablet, which is also a testing tool. The process of checking your talent is as follows. First, use your spiritual energy on the stone tablets. This will give you a score based on your cultivation level and age. There are 10 levels in total, and each level corresponds to a certain score. If you are young and your cultivation power is high, then it is possible that you are above the 5th level. If you are old and your cultivation power is low, then it is possible that you are at about the 1st level. In short, a high level of self-improvement does not mean that you are talented. It also depends on your age. If the stone tablet shows that you are at the 3rd level or higher, then the next step is to check the purity of your spiritual energy. This process is very simple. Use your most powerful move and hit the stone tablet to make it glow. This 7-color deep jade tablet will radiate the 7 colors of the rainbow. Red means the lowest and purple means the best. The third test is to assess your combat ability. The sect will create a mystical realm for disciples who have passed the second test to enter it. They will hunt the demon. Hearing Ma Liang's words, Bai Weiwei became even more determined to become stronger. Her father said that the more difficult the situation, the braver she must be. As long as she fearlessly walks forward, she will have a long way to cultivate immortality before her. Thus, when it was her turn to take the test, she looked very calm. She stepped forward and took a deep breath. She then used her spiritual energy and entered it into the stone tablet. A number slowly rose from the stone tablet. As Bai Weiwei nervously waited, the stone tablet finally gave out the number. Bai Weiwei, level 5 of the Qi condensation realm, 15 years old, level 3, completed. Bai Weiwei widened her eyes as she looked at the number in front of her. There was no joy after she heard what had passed. She felt only endless disappointment. Once she was a genius, and at the age of 10 she took half a step into the realm of foundation building, was in the center of everyone's attention. Now she was 15 years old, but her cultivation power had fallen to the 5th level of the Qi condensation realm. Fortunately, over the years, she gradually came to terms with reality. Tisk, you just have the advantage of being young. Don't forget that after that there will be 2 more trials. Ma Liang teased her. Most of the outer sect disciples were at the 5th level of the Qi condensation realm at the age of 15. Bai Weiwei was able to pass because she was young. If she was still in the 5th level of the Qi condensation realm at the age of 20, she would have been kicked out of the sect after that. It was Ma Liang's turn to test his talent. After Ma Liang injected his spiritual energy into the stone tablet, a trace of emotion appeared in the pockmarked elder's calm eyes. He smiled and said, Ma Liang, level 9 peak of the Qi condensation realm, 18 years old, level 4, passed. Instantly, the other students cast envious and admiring glances at him. The first test was half passed, and although Ma Liang was not the most talented student, he came in 3rd place. He was only behind Yang Mu, who was in the 9th level of the foundation-making realm, and He Long, who was in the 8th level of the foundation-making realm, but in the end, both of them were disciples of the inner sect. Among the disciples of the outer sect, Ma Liang was the best. Well, how did it happen that he is much more talented than us? Yes, some people are born geniuses. We should do better in the second test. Bai Weiwei found that many people passed the first test. Disciples like her who relied on the advantage of age to pass the first test faced tests of spirit energy purity and martial ability with their own cultivation power. How could she pass those 2 trials with weak cultivation power? Thinking about it, the joy of passing the first test completely evaporated. Bai Weiwei looked around and realized that there were about 1,000 people who had passed the first test. But there were more than 30,000 disciples in the sword worship gathering. This did not mean that those expelled students were not strong enough. Many of them were powerful disciples of the inner sect. However, they failed, either due to age or other reasons. Their talent was not good enough. This showed how highly talent is valued in the cultivation world. The first test soon ended and it was time for the second test. Under the guidance of a pockmarked elder, the disciples lined up in a long line and proceeded to the next test. The serious-looking disciple of the inner sect was holding a black sword in his hand, trying to show off. he shouted, rainbow piercing the sun. The red beam of the sword rushed towards the seven-colored black stone tablet. Just at the moment when everyone thought that the stone tablet would be cut in half, it made a buzzing sound. Absorbing the energy of the sword, the black stone tablet slowly turned scarlet. A shadow of disappointment flashed across the eyes of the pockmarked elder. Although this guy was an inner sect disciple, his spiritual energy was not pure enough. He wasn't as good as he looked. The elder shook his head and shouted, Wang Yun, the purity of spiritual energy is at the first level. You failed. The red color or the third level is the passing line. Next. The words of the elder caused a great commotion among the disciples. It was an inner sect disciple, and he only got level 1, but they need to get level 3 or higher to pass the test. In other words, only red, green, blue, and purple could be seen as passing. For a moment, the disciples fell into deep thought. Soon after, the voice of the pockmarked elder sounded again. This time it sounded a little surprised. Yang Mu, blue, the 6th level of purity of spiritual energy, the test is passed. Everyone looked at the young man in the center. He raised his head arrogantly, as if he were the king of the world. He enjoyed the admiration of the audience. After more than half of the students had finished testing, it was finally Bai Weiwei's turn. She had already mentally prepared herself for this moment before the meeting began. She knew that her cultivation power was not stable and only hoped to slow down the decline of her cultivation power. However, reality hit her hard. Without the black sword, the strength of her sword energy would have been greatly reduced. The sword in her hand was the wooden sword she used when she was little. No one would lower the threshold because of her hard work. Bai Weiwei approached the stone tablet with her head down. The moment she drew the wooden sword, it caused quite a stir. After all, those who dared to use a wooden sword were either extremely confident in their own abilities, or fools who overestimated themselves. When Ma Liang saw this, he was surprised. He called out, "Ha ha ha, look here. Isn't she the genius Bai Weiwei? As a disciple of the Qi condensation realm, she dares to take a wooden sword with her to pass the test. She is truly amazing." Hearing Ma Liang's taunts, those who didn't pass and those who passed but looked down on her joined the scoffing team. Do you still think you're a genius? That girl was kicked in the head by a donkey, right? Or is she just an ass? If she can get through, I'll stand on my head and eat shit. Hearing the mocking words, she remembered what her parents expected of her. On the stage, people from other sects were waiting to enjoy the show. Bai Weiwei had no choice. So she smiled resolutely. It was just a test, nothing special. At the elder's nod, she raised her wooden sword. The energy of the white spirit covered the wooden sword, resonating with it. Her gaze gradually hardened. Bai Weiwei squeezed every bit of spiritual energy out of her body, adding it to the sword again and again. It was as if she didn't feel the depletion of spiritual energy in her body. Near the end, she was still madly squeezing the spiritual energy out of her body. However, this was far from enough. He formed a seal in the void and tapped it against her chest and spit out blood from her mouth. "Do you want to die?" the pockmarked elder shouted angrily. He knew this secret technique. The blood essence would increase the strength of the spiritual energy in the sword. And this student in front of him was actually drawing blood from her heart. If she had not been careful, at best she would have remained a cripple, and at worst she would have died on the spot. Just when the elder was about to stop her from doing something stupid, a cold voice sounded in his head. Then the pockmarked elder stopped. He looked towards Xuanyi with a puzzled expression. Huh? Why does Elder Xuan want me to leave disciple alone? If she were to die, it would be a disgrace in front of the other sect masters. The pockmarked elder didn't dare to question Xuanyi because Xuanyi was in charge of the sword worship meeting. But even if Xuanyi wasn't in charge of this meeting, he didn't dare to question him. In the end, the last word was with the ingenious master. How could someone weaker than him question his decision? Therefore, the elder immediately stopped. He looked at the young girl in front of him with a slight pity. He believed that the young girl offended Xuanyi and that was why she was left to fend for herself. Even if she survives, she will become the laughingstock of the sect. However, Bai Weiwei, who was completely focused on testing, did not pay attention to everything around her. She only wanted to use the wooden sword in her hand to fight for her Tao and create a future for herself. She opened her mouth and spat blood onto the wooden sword in her hand. The white light on the wooden sword turned red, and the trembling of the sword intensified as if it was saying goodbye to its owner. It was a lonely battle and no one could help her. To Bai Weiwei, the stone tablet in front of her was as unshakable as a mountain. But the sword in her hand also carried the Tao of her heart, and it was as resplendent as a shooting star. Although the shooting star did not live long, it could still emit a dazzling light. I, Bai Weiwei, will make my life worth living. With her silent cry, the wooden sword in her hand let out a mournful cry. It turned into a streak of red light and rushed straight towards the stone tablet. However, the moment the wooden sword touched the stone tablet, the sword exploded. Bai Weiwei was struck with immense strength, and a mouthful of blood gushed out of her mouth. The stone tablet in front of her was still black, and nothing had changed. Her eyes clouded over and she said in a dazed voice, I really failed. Ma Liang was very pleased with this sight. He laughed silently and thought, ha ha ha, Bai Weiwei, you're a piece of shit now. You really deserve it. The masters on the stage saw everything that happened. Qing Shuji glanced at Bai Weiwei, but quickly looked away because the girl's strength was too weak. She couldn't even activate the lowest level of red on the stone tablet. Although this student's will is strong, her strength is too weak. She didn't even manage to trigger a stone tablet reaction with her blood essence, First Elder said as he shook his head. Furthermore, this sword technique is the most basic sword move in our deep sword sect. She couldn't even start moving her sword with enough force. It's a shame, the third elder frowned and said in a low voice. At that moment, the second elder spoke his mind. Even though this girl's talent is small, her Tao heart is strong. Sigh, what a pity. I don't think it's bad. Wang Yi's eyes flashed as he said indifferently. I'm not surprised to see such weak disciples here. The profound sword sect had clearly declined. Garbage, Li Changqing's personal disciple chuckled, not bothering to hide his contempt. Hearing those comments, the other Southern Domain sect masters wanted to laugh, but didn't dare. Obviously, once they return to their sects, the profound sword sect and its disciples will become the laughing stock of the entire region. Qing Shuji's face fell, but he couldn't help it. Bai Weiwei used to be very talented, but she entered the restricted area by. However, despite so many people asking Xuanyi questions, his expression did not change at all. A faint but calm smile played on his lips. A light breeze blew the hem of his robe, and his black hair flowed freely in it. Xuanyi flew off the stage and landed next to Bai Weiwei. Its elegance captivated her as she lay on the ground of the martial arts training field. He was an incomparable genius and he had a style that no one could copy. Bai Weiwei knew she was done for, so she didn't dare to hope that Xuanyi would break the sect's rules for her. She coughed slightly, and blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. She weakly said, Elder Xuan, I thank you for your mercy, but I've had enough. Please don't. Before she could finish, Xuanyi leaned over and picked up Bai Weiwei in his arms. His voice was extremely gentle when he asked, Are you ready to be my student? Xuanyi stepped off the stage and picked up Bai Weiwei in his arms. In doing so, he ignored the opinions of people from his own sect in the presence of strangers. It was nothing more than giving them a slap in the face. Seeing this, the elders did not look gloomy. They were extremely unhappy with Xuanyi. So this is the genius elder of your deep sword sect. Wang Yi smiled faintly. His eyes were full of mockery. Li Changqing, who was sitting next to him, shook his head and said with disdain, The profound sword sect is in decline. I'm afraid that in a few years they will probably be at the bottom of the top 100 sects in the southern domain. At the very bottom? Sect Master Li, you are an optimist. I think the sect will be removed from the list, Wang Yi immediately said. Hearing the mocking words from the masters of the Myriad Beasts sect and the Heavenly Array sect, many people from the top 100 sects laughed out loud. Apparently, they didn't take the sword sect seriously. Qing Shuji frowned and his expression changed from puzzled to hesitant and then doubtful. He began to wonder if the transfer of leadership was the right decision. Seeing the doubt on the face of the sect leader, Elder Ma became delighted. Just now, Xuanyi ignored him and approached Bai Weiwei. In front of him, Xuanyi picked up Bai Weiwei, whose family was Elder Ma's enemies. He was enraged by Xuanyi's ignorance. When he saw that even the sect master did not understand Xuanyi's actions, he decided to add fuel to the fire. Elder Xuan, I advise you not to interfere. This kind of responsibility is not something you can shoulder. You can ignore me and others, but don't you have any respect for the sect master? You must know that the interests of the sect are paramount, right? Elder Ma's words didn't make Xuanyi feel any emotion because Ma Wulian was like a fly to him. If that fly annoyed him, he was willing to teach her a lesson. Xuanyi released a powerful aura that contained all of his cultivation power. From Xuanyi in the center, a strong wind arose and spread throughout the area. Due to the powerful aura, everyone present could not breathe, especially Ma Wulian, who was closest to Xuanyi. He even felt himself suffocating. He thought that his law enforcement level 1 cultivation strength was not much different from Xuanyi's strength. Even if there was some difference, he thought he had enough strength to protect himself. However, when faced with this kind of pressure, there was nothing he could do but submit. It is important to know that Xuanyi's cultivation power was only one level higher than his, but he felt that the strength of the other side was no less than that of the sect leader. This man was so powerful. Being able to make him feel this way despite being in the same realm meant that Xuanyi's talent far surpassed his own. This person definitely had the ability to fight people with a higher level of cultivation than himself. He knew all along that Xuanyi was very talented in cultivation. However, he felt that he still underestimated Xuanyi. No wonder the sect had attached so much importance to him. Ma Wulian was full of regret. Elder Xuan, this is unfair to other students. Any one of them is better than Bai Weiwei. Elder Ma gathered his courage and spoke. If Elder Xuan still wants to waste the sect's resources on such a weakling, it's not fair to the others. If you don't give us an explanation, I'm sure the other students will be unhappy. The disciples of the Black Sword sect immediately looked at Elder Ma with respect. In their eyes, Elder Ma's righteous words made him a true law enforcement elder. On the other hand, Xuanyi's behavior was just hard to understand. Xuanyi stood in the middle of the martial arts training field. His white robes rustled in the wind, and his eyes sparkled with a cold light. I don't need to explain my actions to anyone. Xuanyi's words were firm and decisive. His invisible aura soared again, and Ma Wulian broke out in a cold sweat. Ma Liang was even more miserable, lying on the ground like a dead dog and not moving at all. Xuanyi did not want to kill him on the spot, otherwise he would have been crushed into mincemeat. Elder Xuan, please, stop. Ma Wulian couldn't hold back any longer and begged for mercy. Xuanyi coldly snorted, and Ma Wulian was put under enormous spiritual pressure, which immediately hurt him. Apparently, he received serious internal injuries. Xuanyi could see the latter's sinister gaze. He wouldn't kill Ma Wulian right here because he didn't want to reveal his true power in front of the other sect masters. Now they were enemies. Xuanyi only aroused some interest this time. On stage, Qing Shuji felt this powerful pressure, and the doubt in his eyes disappeared. The reason was very simple. 3 months ago, Qing Ziuzi saw that Xuanyi was only at the first level of law enforcement. But 3 months later, he broke through to the second level. It was necessary to know that each level of the law enforcement sphere requires a long time for improvement and accumulation. There were tens of thousands of cultivators in the world, and the vast majority of them were stuck in law enforcement for hundreds of years until they died of old age without being able to take a single step forward. But Xuanyi's talent far surpassed his own. He was an absolute genius. With Xuanyi's talent, how could he be wrong? He must have known what he was doing. Qing Shuji's face lit up with joy, and he realized that his decision was the right one. What he didn't know was that Xuanyi had just entered the law enforcement realm when he stood out at the last sword worship gathering. But after he accepted Lin Yingsu as his disciple, he had risen one level. After he accepted Lin Hu, he took off another level. Cultivation? Not at all. He only grew fish, flowers and plants in the back of the mountain every day and became stronger every time he took an apprentice. In this moment, the young girl in Xuanyi's arms stared at him without blinking. Her brain lacked oxygen and she felt like she was in a dream. Her beautiful eyes instantly turned red. No one knew how hard 10 years of cultivation had been for her. In her memories, she always practiced cultivation alone. She relied on her determination and strong will to make it all the way to this day. And now, when she was at her weakest and most in need of protection, this strong and majestic man appeared at her side. He protected her and solved all her problems. The obsession in her heart instantly disappeared because today she received all the awards for her previous hard work. When Xuanyi saw that Bai Weiwei was looking at him with burning eyes, he asked in a gentle voice, "I look good? Elder Xuan, cute." Bai Weiwei blushed and said without thinking, "About? You still call me elder," Xuanyi said. Teacher. Master." Bai Weiwei's body tensed as she realized she was in Xuanyi's arms. She felt the blood rush to her brain. Now that she got rid of her obsession, she began to feel tired due to the depletion of her energy. As the blood rushed to her head, she passed out in Xuanyi's arms, feeling relieved. Looking at the young girl in his arms, Xuanyi felt somewhat helpless. Now that he had accepted a student, there was no need for him to stay here. He turned around and said to Qing Ziuzi, "Sect Master, if the sect objects to me taking Bai Weiwei as their disciple, the sect can remove me from the position of elder." After saying that, he did not care what others thought of him and rushed to the foot of the mountain with Bai Weiwei in his arms. The corners of Qing Shuji's mouth twitched as he stood on the stage. How could he do it? If he didn't appreciate the great genius and kicked him out of the sect, then who would help the sect to rise in the world? A long-awaited voice rang out in Xuanyi's head. "Congratulations to the master for the successful student acceptance. Ding. Congratulations to the master for raising his cultivation power to the 5th level of the law enforcement realm. Ding. Congratulations to the host for receiving the sacred elixir, life creation pill. Ding. Congratulations to the master for obtaining the top grade Zanpakudo. Ding. Congratulations to the host for receiving the imperial scripture, highest yin scripture." After Xuanyi took Bai Weiwei to the back mountain, the people in the meeting had different expressions on their faces. Most of them looked envious. Among them, Heilong and Yang Mu looked especially shocked and disappointed. The two of them came to this meeting hoping to become Elder Zhuan's personal disciples. Now, they could only watch helplessly as an outer sect disciple whose strength was far inferior to theirs became Xuanyi's personal disciple. How could they not be disappointed? The students were especially jealous of Bai Weiwei. This was because Elder Xuanyi carried Bai Weiwei in his arms. This kind of scene was something they didn't even dare to dream about. However, it happened before their very eyes. Moreover, Bai Weiwei's strength and talent were at the very bottom of the rankings. How could they not be jealous? On the training field, Ma Wulian stood in a rage. However, he could not show it. Just now, he was overwhelmed by Xuanyi's aura and suffered serious internal injuries. What's more, in front of so many people, he couldn't even resist Xuanyi's aura. He would definitely become a laughing stock in all of the southern realms. The sectmaster just smiled and shook his head helplessly. After all, this was not the first time Xuanyi had done such outrageous things. What ability did he have to stop Xuanyi? He could only let him do what he wanted. After Xuanyi left, the third test passed very quickly. After all, everyone came here hoping to become Elder Zhuan's personal disciples. Now that Elder Xuan was no longer around, it was best to end this quickly. It was better to go back and cultivate diligently while waiting for the next time Elder Xuan would take on a disciple. After the third trial, the sword worship gathering ended. He Long and Yang Mu became personal disciples of the two sect elders, while Ma Liang became Elder Ma's personal disciple. When the meeting ended, Li Changqing and Wang Yi exchanged glances with a smile in their eyes. After all of the profound sword sect disciples this year were very ordinary. It was great for what they were going to say next. They told Qing Ziuzi, "We were delighted after watching the sword worship meeting. I wonder if you are ready to open the kingdom of wisdom and mysticism." "Yes, old Qing, we agreed on this a few years ago, and you can't go back on your words. None of us will be able to open this mystic realm even if we work together unless we have the approval of your profound sword sect." "Quite right, Comrade Qing Ziuji. Last time, we already missed the opportunity to open the mystic realm. This time, don't try to shirk your responsibility," said the masters of the other great sects. Although Qing Ziuzi guessed their purpose, he was still unhappy. Obey its orders. However, since Li Wendao's heart was directed towards the Tao, his goal was not the southern domains. Instead, he wanted to break through to a higher realm. So he went to a larger region. Unfortunately, when Li Wendao returned to the southern domain, he not only failed to break through, he was on the verge of death. Since he had been absent for hundreds of years, the profound sword sect was no longer the same as it was when he left. Different cultivation methods, different powers, and different beliefs had long since divided the sect into countless smaller sects. The foundation he had worked so hard to build had been destroyed just like that. He wasn't happy. Therefore, before his death, he made a dying wish. Whoever could receive his inheritance and pass the test he set up would become the leader of the southern region. In the mystic realm he had left behind, besides countless treasures, there was one thing that all the sect leaders longed for. These were his notes on how to enter the noble king realm. There were also rumors that Li Wendao had long ago discovered the secret of advancing from the noble king realm, and if he had enough time, he could reach the sage realm. However, he was being pursued by enemies, so he didn't have time to cultivate himself. He could only leave it as his legacy. The people named this mystical realm after Sage Li, a respectful title people gave him. This was commonly known as the Sage Realm. In order for a person who has received his inheritance, received people's recognition, Li Wendao set the rule. Only young geniuses under the age of 30 could enter this mystical realm. After all, the goal was to choose the supreme ruler of the southern domain. If a person had to make up for his lack of talent by self-cultivation, then he was not qualified to be a ruler. The Sage Realm had countless divine weapons, incomparable elixirs, powerful cultivation techniques, and even notes on how to reach the noble king realm. One had to know that there were only a few king realm masters in the entire southern domain. Each of them was the leader of the southern domain and had the power to block the myriad alien races from the outer region. This secret of attaining the noble king's realm was coveted by many sect masters in the southern domain. It was because they had been stuck in the sect master realm for God knows how many years. If their strength could not improve, they would die. How could they not be worried? Not to mention the biggest temptation, the leadership of the entire southern domain. Therefore, every time an incomparable genius appeared in one of the top 100 sects, it definitely caused a stir in the entire southern domain. This time, when the Heavenly Array sect and the Myriad Beasts sect heard about the Sword Worship Assembly, they brought their disciples to take a look at the situation. In the end, they discovered that profound sword sect disciples under the age of 30 were a bunch of trash. This made them extremely excited. How could Qing Ziuji not be aware of the purpose of these top 100 sects? This was also the reason why he attached such great importance to Xuanyi. He hoped that he could select a student with superior talent to participate in this expedition to the mystic realm. But in the end, Qing Ziuji frowned, feeling extremely disappointed. He had stayed in the sect master realm for too long, and his heart yearned for the noble king realm. More importantly, after the death of Li Wendao, the profound sword sect had become nothing more than a shell. Only after receiving the founder's inheritance would it be a truly powerful and cohesive sect. As a sect master, could Qing Zuzi not want the abyssal sword sect to regain its glory? Last time he turned these two people down, but these two old freaks told all the top 100 sects about this mystic realm, and they put pressure on it together. It seemed that this time he should have agreed. Just at the moment when he was feeling extremely depressed, a white-robed figure with incredible talent suddenly appeared in his mind. That's right, that person was Xuanyi. When he thought of Xuanyi, Qing Ziuji's gaze became hard. He calmly said,